All right, so this is a video I'm making to help go over the review worksheet if you need help with it. All right, I'm not going to go through part one, and I'm not going to go through part two as well because there's a lot of different variations to these answers, and I don't want you to think that you're wrong because your answer isn't exactly like I'm saying. So part one has a lot of different variations, so I don't want to go through part one with you because I don't want to confuse you, but just think about what we did in class and how we created the formula for parallelograms and triangles and what we did and what shapes we were creating. Right? For part two, know all the formulas. I'm not going through this one because you guys have all this written down in your notebooks as well, so please refer back to our interactive notebooks that we did in class. All right, so I'm just going to go through these problems here with you, and I'll go through them one by one. So first, if you're asked to find the area of the given parallelogram, well, we know it's a parallelogram based on the shape here, but it's telling us. Right? Now, in order for us to find the area of the parallelogram, well, we need to know what the formula is. And the formula is base times height. So we need to identify what is our base and what is our height. Now remember, our height needs to be at a 90-degree angle, and it has to connect from between the two bases. So here's my height that is connecting these two bases, and I know it is because it's giving me the 90-degree angle. And it's going from this base that I will highlight blue to the other base opposite that is parallel to it that I'm also highlighting blue. So see how that height goes from both of the blue lines. So that means we cannot use this as our base because the yellow line's not connecting these two bases here. Right? It's not going from this base to this base. Right? So now I know that my base is going to be here, 25. So on your quiz, you must be writing what your base is equal to. And I know that my height is this 20. So then if I want to go ahead and then solve for this, I'm just going to plug it in. So my area is equal to base, which is 25, times my height, which is 20. And that means that my area is 500 yards squared. Right? If you're not sure how to multiply 25 and 20, because you'll not be allowed to use a calculator, please make sure that you reach out to me, and I'll try to see if I can get something for you to help you with that. All right, let's move on to the next question. All right, so for this one, same thing. We need to identify what is our base and what is our height. So I see that they have this number 10 here. Now, is that a base or is that a height? Now, it's part of the side of our parallelogram, so you might think it's a base. But remember, we need to identify, well, where is our height? And here's this right angle. So we're looking and seeing, well, this height is connecting this base I'm highlighting in blue to this base and this blue. So that means that my base must be this 5.5, and my height is the distance between those two bases, which is 9 1/4. So to solve for this, we will say our area is equal to our base times our height. We know our base is equal to 5 1/2. It cannot be 9 1/4 because that's the distance between the two bases, which is our height. And our height is then that 9 1/4. So make sure that you are accurately portraying what is your height and what is your base. So then we just plug it into our formula. 5 1/2 times 9 1/4. Right now, if we're going to go ahead and multiply fractions, let's change these into improper fractions. And we do that by multiplying and adding. So 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. So it becomes 11 over 2. 9 times 4 is 36, plus 1 is 37 over 2. All right, now we will then go ahead, we will then go ahead and multiply these two together. So 11 times 37 is equal to 407. So remember, when we're multiplying fractions, we multiply our numerator with our numerator, our denominator with our denominator, and 2 times 2, which is 4. So you can then leave your answer as A is equal to 407 over 4 centimeters squared. I'm sorry. I'm realizing now that this is a 4, and I wrote a 2 there. So this should have been a 4. And then I would have had 2 times 4 would have given me 8. Sorry about that. So it would have been 407 over 8 centimeters squared. Or you could rewrite this as a mixed number, which is then going to give me 50 and 7 over 8 centimeters squared. And if you wanted to, you can write this as a decimal, but I'm not going to suggest doing it for that one. All right, so just make sure that you are, when you're multiplying your fractions, that you're rewriting them into improper fractions. And when we're multiplying our fractions, we just multiply across. So we just do our numerator times our numerator, our denominator times our denominator. We don't need to find any common denominators or anything. All right, now let's move on to the next question. Okay, for this problem, it says find the height of a parallelogram that has an area of 66 feet squared and a base of 12 feet. So for this one, we don't need to have any figure, but let's just identify what our formula is. So the area of a parallelogram is equal to base times height. They're telling us our area is 66, so I can say A is equal to 66 feet squared. And then they tell me that my base is 12, so B is then equal to 12 feet. Now, in order for us to go ahead and solve the height, which we do not know, we will plug in what we do know. A is equal to 66, so wherever I see an A, I can rewrite it as 66. And B is equal to 12, so wherever I see B, I can rewrite it as 12. So now I have 12H. And if I want to solve for this, these are being multiplied, so the opposite or inverse of multiplication is division. And what we do to one side, we do to the other. So then it will be 66 divided by 12. So let's just do this off to the side for you in case you need help. Well, 12 does not go into 6, but it goes into 66 5 times, and 5 times 12 will give me 60. We then subtract this. So 12 cannot go into 6, so that means we need to add to 0. And since we're adding a 0 here, we're creating a decimal. We drop that 0, and 12 goes into 65 times. So then our height is equal to 5.5 feet. And if you wanted to check your answer, you can just go ahead and multiply 5.5 times 12, and you'll get 66. All right, let's move on to the next question. Okay, now for this one, we're now finding the area of the given triangle. All right, so we're finding the area of the triangle here. Let me highlight this instead of writing underneath it. Finding the area of the triangle. So now we're using a different formula. Well, our formula for area of a triangle is area is equal to 1/2 base times height. So once again, we still need to find what our base is, and we need to find what our height is. And just like with a parallelogram, when we're finding the height, we're looking to see, well, what has that right angle? And here is my right angle. So now the difference between a parallelogram and a triangle is a parallelogram is connecting the two bases that are opposite or parallel of each other. Here, our height is going from the base to the opposite vertex that's not touching our base. So that tells us that this here is my height. So I know I can fill in that my height is equal to 12.25. And then that means my base must be this number here, 10.5, because that is where my base or my height is touching. All right, so then my base is 10.5. So now I just plug it into my formula. My area is equal to, let me put this somewhere else or make this a little bit smaller. Let's do it here. Area is equal to 1/2 of our base, which is 10.5, times our height, which is 12.25. Right? Some of you are having trouble with multiplying numbers like this, so let's go ahead and multiply these off to the side. So let's do 12.25 times 10.5. Right? So 5 times 5 gives me 25. 5 times 2 gives me 10. We add that 2, so it gives me 12. So we put the 2 and carry the 1. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. So we put the 1 and carry the 1. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. All right, now I'm moving to the next number, to the next digit, which is going to be that 0. So I'm not going to use these numbers I'm carrying anymore. That also means I need to move over. So I'm moving my place value, so I won't put anything here underneath this 5. And now I multiply everything by 0, and when we multiply everything by 0, it's just going to be equal to 0. All right, so now when I move on to my next number, this 1, I'm moving another place value. So that means I need to put another x, or sometimes you put zeros there to mean I'm moving on to the next value. And now I just multiply everything by this 1. So 1 times 5 gives me 5. 1 times 2 gives me 2. 1 times 2 gives me 2. And 1 times 1 gives me 1. Once I multiply all them, I will now add down. Well, 5 plus nothing is 5. 2 plus 0 is 2. 1 plus 0 plus 5 is 6. 6 plus 0 plus 2 is 8. 0 plus 2 is 2. And here's a 1. Our decimal values that we have in total, we have 1, 2, and 3. So I need to move this 1, 2, 3 decimal places. So now my area is equal to 1/2 of 128.625. Right, now what we're going to do is divide this by 2. Let me erase some of this to clear some space. Okay, I'm now going to do this division part up here. So it'll then be 128.625 divided by 2. Well, does 2 go into 1? No. We move on. Does 2 go into 12? Yes, it goes into it 6 times. Let me make sure that you can read this. So it goes into it 6 times. 6 times 2 is 12, and we subtract down. That gives me 8.625. So then we ask, does 2 go into 8? Yes, it goes into it 4 times. So we multiply it together and we subtract down. That gives me 0.625. So if you notice, now I'm moving on the other side of the decimal, so I need to make sure I add my decimal there as well. Does 2 go into 6? Yes, it goes into it 3 times. So now we'll subtract this. So it gives me 0.025. Does 2 go into 2? Yes, it goes into it 1 time. So now we will subtract over this 0.02. That leaves me with this 5. Let me just pause it. All right, so now when we subtract down, this is going to give me this 5 that's remaining. You don't need to carry this decimal down every time. And now does 2 go into 5? Yes, it goes into it 2 times. So then this gives me 4. When we subtract this, we now have to add another 0 to bring this down. 2 goes into 10 5 times. So our final answer is 64.3125 kilometers squared. That would be the area of that triangle. Okay, now for this next problem, we need to identify our base and our height. So here I see my right angle. So that tells me, it's going to tell me something about my height. Remember, these dotted lines are giving us an extension of our figure so that we can see where they would intersect to form a right angle. So since this is my 90-degree angle and it's going from where this base would be to this opposite vertex here, that tells me that this is my base. And then that tells me that this distance here, where that 90-degree goes from that to that other opposite vertex, is our height. So when I go to solve for this question of my area is equal to 1/2 base times height, I know that my base is equal to 25, and I know that my height is equal to 14. Right now, I will just substitute these in. My area is equal to 1/2 my base times my height. I will then multiply. I'm going to do 1/2 times 14 just because I know 2 14s divisible by 2. So area is then equal to 25 times 7. And now I multiply this. 25 times 7 is equal to 175 centimeters squared. So that would be your final answer. Okay, so the directions for this one says find the missing dimension. And remember, your dimensions will be your base and your height. Right? So find the missing dimension when given the area and one of our dimensions. All right, so let's go ahead and solve this next question. Okay, so if we're going to solve for this problem, we first need to look at the formula because we have a triangle. It's 1/2 of base times height. And now we need to see, well, what do we have? Well, they tell me flat out that my area is equal to 35. And now we need to look, well, are they solving for a base or a height? Well, this is a B, so that means I don't know my base. And if you notice, here's our right angle, and it's going from the extension of this base here in the bottom that now I'll highlight in red, to this other vertex here. So that means that this 7 must be our height. So I can say h is equal to 7 miles. So now I'll plug it into my formula. Area, we know is 35. So instead of A or area, I'll put 35 is then equal to 1/2 of 7 times my base, B. Right now, the first thing I'm going to do, rather than dividing 7 by 2 and getting 3.5, what I'll do is I will get rid of this 1/2. So they're being multiplied. How do we get rid of multiplication? We divide by 1/2. So we divide each side by 1/2. So now it's 35 divided by 1/2. Remember, we keep, change, flip. Yeah, that's the action. That's what we do when we're dividing fractions. So now we keep our first number as 35. We change the division to multiplication, and we flip this fraction to a 2 instead of 1/2. And now 35 times 2 gives me 70. So now it just allows for me to solve this question a little bit easier. And now I don't have to worry about dividing by 3.5. If you left it as 7/2, it would be the same thing essentially, but I was just getting rid of my 1/2 first. Now to get rid of this multiplication of 7, I will divide by 7, and B is now equal to 10 miles. Okay, now for this one. Once again, they give us the area is 5 centimeters squared. We're trying to solve for the height. And now we're seeing, well, what did they give us? Well, here is our right angle. And now we see it's connecting this base and it's going to this opposite vertex. So that means that here is my height and this side here is my base. So now I can fill in, I don't know my height, but my base I know is going to be equal to 4. So our formula, area is equal to 1/2 base times height. We know our area is 5. We don't know our height, but we know our base is 4. Now we just solve. Now this is easily, we can do 4 divided by 2, so I'm not going to get rid of that 1/2. I will just say 5 is equal now to 2h. Right? I will do 4 divided by 2. And now I'll get rid of this. In order to get rid of this 2 being multiplied to our height, we will do the inverse operation, which is division. So we can then say our height is equal to 5 over 2, or our height is equal to 2 1/2, or 2.5. Right? As long as if you're putting the units here, I don't really care which way you write it. They will all be acceptable for a final answer. All right, so now for this next question, we're asked to find the area of this shaded region, which I'm just going to go ahead and shade with my highlighter real quick. It's this region here. Right? You will be able to see it a lot clearer on your paper than what it's here. But it's this region here is what we are trying to solve for. All right, so now what we need to look and see is, well, what type of shapes do I have? Well, first I notice this outside shape here. Right? I'm going to highlight this in red because this black shape that we have, I may not know how to find the area of a trapezoid, which is what that is. So I need to then use some of the formulas that we do know to solve for this. And I know what this shape here in this red, and that is a rectangle. So off to the side, I'm going to just draw this. All right, I know that this side is both of these combined, so that will then give me 13. And this base is 8. So I'm going to fill in this rectangle as 13 and 8. The next shape I see, now it's not part of my black figure, but it's something that I can remove from this rectangle to help me solve the black figure. So this here is not part of what we want to solve the area of, but I can see that that is a right triangle. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in. I know that this has a height of 8 and it has a base of 7. So now, if I want to solve for the area of this entire red triangle, I can then just say that my area is equal to base times height. My base I can say is 8. My height I can say is equal to 13. And now I would just say area is equal to 8 times 13, or my area is equal to 104 feet squared. Now remember, that's in this entire rectangle. That's as if I filled in this entire rectangle and said, oh, well, this is what the area of it is. Well, we don't want the entire rectangle. We're trying to look and remove this portion of that filled in area. So in order for us to remove this, we would subtract it. That's how we would do that algebraically. So then I will find the area of this triangle. Area is equal to 1/2. My base I will say is equal to 7. My height I will say is equal to 8. So 7 times 8. Well, 1/2 of 8 is 4. And 4 times 7 is equal to 28 feet squared. Right? So if I'm removing this 28 feet squared from this 104, we would do that through subtraction. All right, so now we will then say 104 minus 28, and that will then give us an area of 76 feet squared. So we solved this by first solving for the area of the entire rectangle, and then second, removing the area of that triangle here to figure out what was left over in just that black region. All right, let's move on to the last question. Okay, for this one it says find the area, or find x if the area of the entire figure is 120 centimeters squared. So I'm going to look at this and see the different shapes that they build for me. Here they give me this rectangle that I'm outlining in purple. So off to the side, I will outline this rectangle. And I see that this has a height of 6 and it has a base of 12 because both of those segments are 6, so that would be 12. So I can then go ahead and find for the area of this rectangle by saying area is equal to base times height. I'll say my base is 6, my height is 12. They're interchangeable. And area is then equal to 6 times 12, which is then going to be equal to 72 centimeters squared. So I know that this area is 72 centimeters squared. So then that means if I want to solve for what the area of this triangle is, that I will highlight in blue or outline in blue, and put this down here. Let me redraw this. Well, if I want to know what the area of this triangle is, I can take the area of the entire figure and subtract the area of this rectangle at the bottom. So 120 minus 72, and that will then give me 48. So I know that this area of my triangle is 48 centimeters squared. Right? So now let's see what we have. Well, here is our right angle, and it's going from this side of the triangle to the opposite vertex here. So that means this red line must be our base. And that has a distance of 12 because we have both of these 6 that we have to add together. And then to find our height, well, that's what we're looking for. That is our x. So I know that my base is equal to 12 and my height is equal to x. So now I can solve this by finding the area of a triangle. Area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. Well, my area, I just said, has to be equal to 48. I don't know why it says 4. So 48. So 48 is equal to 1/2. Our base, we said, is 12 times x, which is our height. Well, 1/2 of 12 is equal to 6. So now we have 48 is equal to 6x. We will then divide each side by 6, and x is then equal to 8 feet. So that means that the height of that triangle, the x, must be 8. All right, that is it for this video. If you need anything, message me on the assignment part of your Google Classroom.